Tonight, I am not standing before you to teach you how to fight people. I am standing before you to show you how to finally stop letting people fight inside your mind. Because the smartest way to deal with toxic people is not louder arguments, sharper comebacks, or stronger walls made of bitterness. The smartest way is mastery. Mastery of your voice. Mastery of your boundaries. Mastery of your time. Mastery of your heart. Mastery of your worth. And before you lean back and tell yourself, I already know who the toxic ones are, I want you to lean forward for just a moment. Because the most dangerous toxic person you have ever dealt with is not always the one who raised their voice at you. It is often the one who quietly trained you to doubt your own. Some of you walked into this room carrying names in your chest. A coworker, a partner, a family member, a friend who slowly became a stranger. And some of you walked in carrying something heavier than a name. You walked in carrying the exhaustion of explaining yourself to people who were never trying to understand you. You do not need more patience. You need clarity. Toxic people are not powerful because they are loud. They are powerful because they confuse. They twist simple truth into complicated guilt. They turn your kindness into an invitation for disrespect. They take your silence and call it agreement. They take your forgiveness and call it permission. And if you are honest with yourself, you have not stayed because you are weak. You stayed because you are loyal. You stayed because you see potential. You stayed because you believe people can grow. You stayed because your heart is wide and generous and brave. But hear me clearly now. A wide heart must still be protected by a wise mind. The smartest way to deal with toxic people begins the moment you stop asking, how do I change them? And start asking, how do I protect what they cannot reach? You cannot heal someone who refuses to see their wound. You cannot rescue someone who enjoys drowning in drama. You cannot build peace with someone who survives on chaos. And yet, so many strong people exhaust themselves trying to be the cure for someone who only wants a crowd for their pain. Listen to me. You are not a rehabilitation center for broken behavior. You are a living, breathing human being with dreams that need oxygen, with creativity that needs space, with peace that deserves to exist without apology. The smartest way to deal with toxic people is to stop explaining your boundaries to people who only want to test them. You do not owe a speech for your self-respect. You do not owe a courtroom defense for your decision to step back. You do not owe a performance of pain to justify your no. Your no is complete. Your no is enough. Your no is a sentence that does not need a paragraph. Some of you were taught that being good means being endlessly available. You were taught that being loving means enduring discomfort quietly. You were taught that being spiritual means tolerating emotional violence with a smile. But wisdom teaches something very different. Wisdom teaches you that love without limits becomes self-abandonment. And self-abandonment is exactly what toxic environments depend on. They depend on you shrinking your needs so their behavior does not look so large. They depend on you doubting your perception so their manipulation does not look so sharp. They depend on you staying confused because confusion keeps you close. The smartest way to deal with toxic people is to stop negotiating with confusion. Pay attention to patterns, not apologies. An apology without changed behavior is not healing, it is maintenance. A promise without action is not hope, it is delay. A tear without accountability is not growth, it is theater. You do not need to become cruel to be free. You need to become precise. You need to become emotionally precise. Notice how you feel after every interaction. Notice if your shoulders tighten when their name appears on your phone. Notice if your energy drops the moment their voice enters the room. Your body speaks long before your mind gathers the courage to tell the truth. And your body has been begging you to listen. The smartest way to deal with toxic people is to stop trying to be understood by someone who benefits from misunderstanding you. There are people who will twist your words no matter how gently you speak them. There are people who will hear attack where you offered honesty. There are people who will turn your boundaries into accusations, your needs into selfishness, and your growth into betrayal. Do not let their discomfort become your prison. You are allowed to outgrow rooms that once taught you how to survive. You are allowed to become too honest for conversations built on pretense. You are allowed to become too grounded for relationships that thrive on emotional turbulence. You are allowed to choose calm, even if calm makes someone else feel exposed. The smartest way to deal with toxic people is to understand that access to you is not a human right. It is a privilege, and privileges can be adjusted. Some of you think cutting access makes you heartless, but boundaries do not make you cold. They make you sustainable. You cannot pour into your future while someone is drilling holes in your present. You cannot build confidence in an environment that feeds on insecurity. You cannot discover your voice in a room that rewards silence. And you cannot become your full self while constantly managing someone else's emotional storms. There is a quiet grief that comes with choosing distance. It is the grief of the person you hoped someone would become. It is the grief of the relationship you kept redesigning in your mind. It is the grief of all the conversations you rehearsed that never led to change. Let yourself feel that grief, but do not let it chain you to what hurts you. The smartest way to deal with toxic people is to release the fantasy that they will finally understand if you just say it one more time. Understanding is not always missing. Sometimes it is simply unwanted. Sometimes clarity would require responsibility, and responsibility would require change, and change would threaten the comfort of their old behavior. So they stay exactly where they are, and you must decide if you will stay there with them. You do not need a dramatic exit. You need a disciplined one. A disciplined withdrawal of emotional labor. A disciplined refusal to engage in circular arguments. A disciplined silence when your nervous system is begging for rest. Silence, in this case, is not weakness, it is strategy. It is choosing not to feed a fire that only grows when you give it oxygen. The smartest way to deal with toxic people is to stop volunteering your emotional energy to conversations that have no intention of resolution. You will recognize these conversations by how they end exactly where they began. No accountability, no repair. No forward movement, only exhaustion, only self-doubt, only that familiar heaviness in your chest that whispers, "Why do I feel worse after trying to fix this?" Because you are trying to repair something that is being actively protected in its brokenness. And listen carefully now. Distance does not always mean disappearing. Sometimes it means redefining the depth of access. It means changing the subject when the conversation becomes cruel. It means leaving earlier than you used to. It means answering less. It means sharing less of your inner world with people who mishandle it. It means becoming selective, not secretive. Private, not closed. Protected, not bitter. The smartest way to deal with toxic people is to stop expecting them to celebrate the version of you that no longer serves them. Your growth may interrupt their control. Your confidence may disrupt their influence. Your independence may expose their dependence on your emotional availability. Do not apologize for evolving past what once tolerated you. Some people loved the version of you that did not require much. Some people were comfortable with the version of you that did not challenge their behavior. Some people felt powerful around the version of you that stayed silent when it hurt. But that version of you is not your final form. That version of you was a bridge. And bridges are not meant to be lived on. The smartest way to deal with toxic people is to stop internalizing their projections. When someone constantly blames, it does not always mean you are at fault. When someone constantly criticizes, it does not always mean you are failing. When someone constantly undermines your confidence, it does not always mean you are fragile. Sometimes it means they are threatened by your steadiness. Sometimes it means your clarity exposes their chaos. Sometimes it means your peace confronts the noise they have learned to call normal. You do not have to carry what does not belong to you. Put down the shame that was handed to you without evidence. Put down the guilt that arrived without a fair trial. Put down the responsibility for emotions you did not create and cannot control. The smartest way to deal with toxic people is to develop emotional literacy. Learn the difference between discomfort and danger. Learn the difference between constructive feedback and emotional erosion. Learn the difference between accountability and control. A healthy relationship can hold disagreement without humiliation. A healthy conversation can hold boundaries without retaliation. A healthy connection can survive honesty without revenge. If your honesty is punished, That is not communication. That is conditioning. The smartest way to deal with toxic people is to stop rewarding behavior that harms you. Every time you over-explain your boundary, you teach someone that your limits are negotiable. Every time you forgive without repair, you teach someone that consequences do not apply to them. Every time you return without change, you teach someone that your pain has a short memory. Compassion without discernment becomes self-neglect. You can wish someone healing without placing yourself back into their harm. You can care from a distance. You can love without proximity. You can hold respect without availability. And that is not cruelty. That is maturity. The smartest way to deal with toxic people is to invest in your own emotional infrastructure. Build friendships that feel safe. Build routines that ground your nervous system. Build a life so rich in meaning that chaos becomes less attractive. When your life is full, manipulation becomes easier to recognize. When your self-worth is strong, guilt loses its power. When your time is protected, emotional drain becomes a red flag instead of a normal condition. Some of you have normalized emotional exhaustion because you learned early that love required sacrifice. But love is not meant to consume you. Love is meant to expand you. And if a relationship consistently shrinks your voice, shrinks your confidence, shrinks your joy, shrinks your sense of self, then it is not refining you. It is reducing you. The smartest way to deal with toxic people is to trust your quiet realizations, not the dramatic arguments, not the explosive endings, but the gentle, steady awareness that grows in you when you finally stop defending what hurts. That awareness is wisdom. It does not rush. It does not shout. It simply becomes impossible to ignore. And one day, you wake up and realize you no longer have the emotional capacity to carry someone else's unresolved patterns. Not because you are heartless, but because you are finally responsible for your own life. The smartest way to deal with toxic people is to let go of the role you were trained to play. The fixer, the peacemaker, the emotional translator, the one who absorbs the impact so others do not have to feel uncomfortable. You are allowed to step out of that role. You are allowed to choose relationships where emotional labor is shared, not assigned. You are allowed to expect reciprocity. You are allowed to expect kindness that does not come with conditions. You are allowed to expect safety in your vulnerability. And if someone cannot meet you there, you do not need to drag them forward. You only need to walk. The smartest way to deal with toxic people is to stop asking, "Why are they like this?" and start asking, "Why am I still making space for what drains me?" That question is not meant to shame you. It is meant to free you. Because when you understand your own patterns, you stop repeating someone else's. You stop confusing familiarity with love. You stop mistaking intensity for connection. You stop calling survival chemistry a soulmate bond. You stop chasing emotional highs that always end in emotional collapse. And slowly, quietly, powerfully, your standards rise. Not out of arrogance, out of self-respect. The smartest way to deal with toxic people is to let your life become your boundary. Let your schedule protect you. Let your goals anchor you. Let your values guide your choices. Let your peace become non-negotiable. Not everyone deserves front-row access to your becoming. Some people only qualify for a distant view. And that is enough. Tonight, I want you to walk away with one unshakable truth living inside your chest. You are not required to stay in relationships that cost you your self-trust. You are not required to explain your healing to people who benefited from your pain. You are not required to keep proving your worth to anyone who cannot see it. The smartest way to deal with toxic people is to choose yourself without announcing it. Choose yourself when you leave the conversation early. Choose yourself when you stop answering messages that twist your stomach. Choose yourself when you cancel the plan that feels like emotional labor. Choose yourself when you tell the truth gently and stand by it firmly. Choose yourself when you stop shrinking to maintain harmony that was never mutual. Because one day, not far from now, you will look back and realize that the bravest thing you ever did was not confronting someone who hurt you. It was refusing to let them continue. It was protecting your light without turning it into fire. It was choosing peace without becoming cold. It was loving deeply without sacrificing yourself. And that, my friends, is the smartest way to deal with toxic people. You are not responsible for fixing what you did not break. And I need you to hear that slowly, because many of you have built entire lives around cleaning up damage you never caused, carrying shame that was never yours, apologizing for storms you did not create, and staying long after your spirit asked you to leave. Somewhere along the way, you were trained to believe that love means repair, even when you were never the one who shattered the room. You were trained to believe that patience is proven by how much pain you can tolerate without changing your tone. You were trained to believe that if something falls apart in front of you, it must somehow be your responsibility to gather the pieces, bleed quietly on the edges, and rebuild what you never destroyed. But tonight, I want you to loosen your grip on that story, because there is a dangerous lie hiding inside your kindness. The lie is that your goodness must always come in the form of sacrifice. The lie is that your empathy must always be proven through endurance. The lie is that if someone is hurting, you must become the solution, even when their pain is rooted in choices you did not make, wounds you did not open, and patterns you did not teach them. You are not responsible for fixing what you did not break. And yet, look at how many of you are tired. Not tired from building your dreams. Not tired from learning who you are. Not tired from growing. You are tired from carrying emotional weight that does not belong to you. You are tired from translating someone else's anger into something you can survive. You are tired from softening the impact of someone else's chaos. You are tired from holding a relationship together with hands that are already trembling. You are tired because you were taught that being strong means becoming the emotional shock absorber for everyone around you. Some of you grew up in homes where silence was survival. Some of you grew up in environments where moods ruled the air, and you learned very early how to read a room faster than you learned how to read a book. You learned how to shrink your needs. You learned how to stay alert. You learned how to become useful before you learned how to become safe. And when you grow up like that, you carry one powerful belief into adulthood without realizing it. If I can just be better, calmer, quieter, kinder, smarter, softer, more understanding, then maybe the situation will improve. If I adjust myself enough, maybe the chaos will stop. If I bend correctly, maybe the pressure will disappear. But listen to me now. You were not created to become a human adaptation to other people's dysfunction. You were not born to be the emotional manager of unresolved pain that someone refuses to confront. You were not designed to be the quiet repair shop for broken behavior. You are not responsible for fixing what you did not break. There is a difference between compassion and obligation. Compassion allows you to understand someone's struggle. Obligation convinces you that their struggle must become your burden. Compassion sees pain. Obligation absorbs it. Compassion says, I care. Obligation says, I will carry this for you, even if it crushes me. Some of you are deeply compassionate people who were never taught how to protect yourselves. So your heart became wide, but your boundaries stayed thin. Your empathy grew strong, but your self-preservation remained underdeveloped. And the world, especially broken people, can feel that. They can feel your willingness to stay. They can feel your readiness to explain their behavior back to them in gentler language. They can feel your habit of giving second chances to first patterns. And suddenly, without realizing how it happened, you are no longer standing in relationship. You are standing in repair mode, trying to stabilize what you did not destabilize, trying to soothe what you did not provoke, trying to fix what you did not break. Let me say something that may unsettle you. Understanding someone's pain does not require you to accept their harm. Knowing where someone came from does not mean you must remain where they are. Empathy is not a contract that binds you to emotional injury. You can see someone clearly and still step away. You can recognize their wounds and still refuse to become the place where those wounds are acted out. You can love someone and still choose distance. You can care deeply and still protect your nervous system. You can hold grace without sacrificing your stability. You are not responsible for fixing what you did not break. Some of you are carrying guilt that was quietly planted in you by people who never learned how to take responsibility for themselves. They learned how to redirect. They learned how to deflect. They learned how to turn your reaction into the main problem, They learned how to frame your boundaries as cruelty. They learned how to present their emotional explosions as your failure to understand them. And slowly, carefully, they taught you to believe that every rupture must be repaired by you, that every conflict must be solved by your softness, that every misunderstanding must be cleared up by your emotional labor, that every disappointment must be managed by your flexibility. But what you were never taught is that accountability belongs to the person who created the damage, not the person who notices it, not the person who feels it, not the person who finally speaks about it. There is a quiet violence in being blamed for someone else's inability to regulate their emotions. There is a quiet violence in being expected to stabilize someone who refuses to stabilize themselves. There is a quiet violence in being positioned as the healer for behavior that continues without interruption. And over time, you begin to confuse exhaustion with love. You begin to confuse effort with connection. You begin to confuse intensity with intimacy. You begin to confuse emotional crisis with closeness. And you stay, not because you are foolish, but because you were trained to be loyal to what hurts you. You were trained to believe that leaving broken dynamics makes you ungrateful. You were trained to believe that walking away from emotional responsibility makes you selfish. You were trained to believe that if you stop trying, you stop caring. But there is something more honest than endless trying. It is recognizing when you are the only one repairing the bridge. It is noticing when you are the only one apologizing. It is seeing clearly when you are the only one reflecting, adjusting, softening, and learning. A relationship that can only survive on your emotional labor is not a relationship. It is a dependency. And dependency often disguises itself as love. You are not responsible for fixing what you did not break. Some of you are still standing inside stories that no longer belong to you. Stories where you are cast as the difficult one, the sensitive one, the dramatic one, the selfish one, the ungrateful one, the demanding one, the one who expects too much. But when you step back and look carefully, what you actually asked for was safety, respect, consistency, honesty, effort, emotional presence. What you actually asked for was not perfection, it was accountability. And you were made to feel unreasonable for wanting what should be basic. So you lowered your voice. You softened your expectations. You explained your pain in smaller and smaller pieces. You adjusted your tone until even your hurt sounded polite. You edited your truth so it would be easier to digest. And still nothing changed. Because you cannot fix what you did not break. And you cannot repair what someone else continues to damage. Some people do not want healing. They want relief. They want comfort without responsibility. They want understanding without reflection. They want forgiveness without repair. They want connection without change. They want your empathy to shield them from their own behavior. They want your compassion to excuse their lack of growth. They want your patience to buy them more time to remain exactly the same. And if you are not careful, you will spend your life trying to help people who are deeply invested in not helping themselves. You will spend your life offering light to people who prefer the familiarity of darkness. You will spend your life offering clarity to people who survive on confusion. You will spend your life offering peace to people who use conflict as currency. You are not responsible for fixing what you did not break. There is a moment in every emotionally mature life when you realize something that changes how you move forever. You realize that your presence is powerful. Your attention is powerful. Your emotional availability is powerful. Your willingness to stay is powerful. And when you offer those things to people who misuse them, you are not being loving. You are being unprotected. Your energy is not an unlimited resource. Your nervous system is not designed for continuous emotional emergency. Your heart is not meant to be a shelter for every storm that refuses to learn how to pass. You deserve relationships that add weight to your life in meaning, not an emotional burden. You deserve conversations that lead somewhere, not circles that drain you. You deserve accountability that shows up without you having to beg for it. You deserve repair that does not require you to abandon yourself to make it happen. And still, some of you hesitate. Because part of you is afraid of what happens when you stop fixing. You are afraid of being seen as cold. You are afraid of being misunderstood. You are afraid of being talked about in rooms you no longer enter. You are afraid of being blamed for distance you created to survive. You are afraid that your absence will be rewritten as cruelty. But listen to me gently. You cannot control the story told by someone who refuses to take responsibility. You cannot manage the narrative of someone who needs a villain to protect their self-image. You cannot edit yourself small enough to fit into someone else's avoidance. At some point, you must decide whether you will continue performing emotional rescue, or whether you will finally choose emotional integrity. You are not responsible for fixing what you did not break. Some of you are still waiting for the day someone finally realizes how much you have done, how much you have absorbed, how much you have forgiven, how much you have carried silently. But recognition does not always arrive in the places where you suffered the most. And sometimes the only acknowledgement you will ever receive is the peace you feel when you stop participating in what harmed you. Sometimes the reward is quiet. A quieter mind, a steadier body, a softer breath, a lighter chest, a nervous system that is no longer constantly preparing for emotional impact. That is not emptiness. That is healing. And healing does not require you to remain in proximity to what wounded you. You are allowed to walk away from cycles you did not create. You are allowed to step out of roles you never applied for. You are allowed to release responsibility for outcomes that are not yours to manage. You are allowed to let adults carry their own emotional consequences. You are allowed to choose yourself without needing permission from the people who benefited most from your self-neglect. You are not responsible for fixing what you did not break. There is a quiet courage in saying, "I will no longer be the one who makes this work alone." There is a quiet courage in allowing discomfort to exist without rushing in to soothe it. There is a quiet courage in resisting the urge to rescue people from lessons they must learn on their own. There is a quiet courage in allowing distance to do what conversation could not. Some of you have talked long enough, explained long enough, waited long enough, hoped long enough, softened long enough, adjusted long enough. And now what remains is not more conversation. It is choice. It is clarity. It is alignment. It is deciding what you will no longer carry. Because when you stop fixing what you did not break, something beautiful begins to happen. Your energy returns. Your creativity wakes up. Your laughter becomes easier. Your decisions become cleaner. Your relationships become simpler. Not easier, but clearer. You begin to notice how different it feels to be around people who take responsibility for themselves. You begin to feel how light connection can be when you are not constantly managing emotional risk. You begin to remember who you were before you became the emotional safety net for everyone else. You begin to rediscover the parts of you that were put on hold while you were busy stabilizing others. You begin to rebuild your life around presence instead of damage control. You begin to trust your instincts again. You begin to listen to the quiet signals in your body instead of overriding them with guilt. You begin to recognize the difference between helping and harming yourself in the name of love. And slowly the urge to fix fades, not because you stop caring, but because you start caring about the right person, you. You are not responsible for fixing what you did not break. You are responsible for how long you stay where you are not safe. You are responsible for how often you override your own needs. You are responsible for how you speak to yourself when you feel exhausted and resentful and unseen. You are responsible for the standards you set for how you are treated. You are responsible for the environments you allow to shape your nervous system. You are responsible for the relationships you choose to nourish. You are responsible for the life you are building with your time, your attention, and your emotional investment. And some of you need to forgive yourselves tonight. Forgive yourselves for staying too long. Forgive yourselves for not knowing what you know now. Forgive yourselves for mistaking endurance for love. Forgive yourselves for believing that your suffering was proof of your commitment. Forgive yourselves for being young in situations that required wisdom you had not yet learned. Forgive yourselves for trying to save what could not be saved by you. Forgive yourselves for being human in systems that rewarded self-erasure. You did the best you could with the tools you had, but you are not required to keep using tools that are breaking you. You are allowed to put down the emotional toolbox. You are allowed to stop fixing. You are allowed to stop repairing. You are allowed to stop smoothing over what continues to cut you. You are allowed to stop managing the emotional climate for everyone else. You are allowed to stop translating disrespect into misunderstanding. You are allowed to stop calling neglect a rough phase. You are allowed to stop protecting people from the consequences of their own behavior. You are allowed to choose a different way. A way that does not revolve around damage control. A way that does not depend on your emotional exhaustion. A way that does not require you to keep proving your worth through tolerance. A way that does not teach others that your boundaries are flexible when they apply pressure. A way that finally honors the truth you have been carrying quietly for a very long time. You are not responsible for fixing what you did not break.